Good afternoon, class, and welcome to week 8. I will be going over my research portfolio titled How Scientific is Marriage Counseling. My name is Jeremy Rigby, and we will try and break down some of this information for you. So starting off, I went over a little bit of the history of the GSS website, how it came to be, some of the interesting features of it, just to kind of give a basic idea of why it is important and why GSS is used in the statistics world. As I say, it's been around since 1972. Politicians, policymakers, scholars use this to gain more information. This gives you variables with information that you can run tests through the SPSS website. It gives you various features that can kind of help you narrow down your specific topic. It is a little bit difficult to use at first, but once you grasp some of the terminology, it is fairly user-friendly. I struggled a little bit with it at the beginning because I didn't understand the terminology. I was new to statistics, but now I feel fairly confident to use it. So my question that was associated with my variable is marriage counseling. Is marriage counseling scientific? The variable title is Marcon, short for marriage counseling. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not. We had to choose from a topic from 2012 to 2016, and in the 31 years of collection data, it only appeared in 1 year, which met my needs, but it did kind of hinder me from being able to cross-reference, but it fit. So, moving on. Here I go over the scientific method, breaking down the 5 steps of stating your hypothesis, your null hypothesis, your significance level, running your tests. Fourth, you're going to examine your results to the hypothesis, and fifth, you will state whether your results can or cannot reject your null hypothesis. Next, we go into frequencies. So here's your first chart. Kind of gives you an idea of how many people gave valid information and how many gave missing information and what your mean was, which is 3.02. And your mean and mode and standard deviation on the next page. And then here is the meat and potatoes of it, giving you very scientific, pretty scientific, not too scientific, and not scientific at all, which was the bulk of it. Only 179 of the 479, which was 37.4%, said that is not scientific at all. And only 7.5%, or 36 people, said it is scientific, which was a little bit shocking to me, but it is what it is. Alright, so going down, kind of give you some of the missing information, and a total of 1,974 people who contributed to this sample data. Moving on down the page, it breaks it down basically what I just told you, and then leads us to our first of the 3 topics. Research articles that I collected. This one kind of gives you a little bit of a history of marriage counseling in the United States, stating that it wasn't until the 1920s when it started to be practiced in the United States. And those who were practicing it were not trained marriage counselors. They were sex therapists, family therapists, and just people who were familiar with medicine. In my opinion, this might have something to do with why people do not view marriage counseling as a scientific practice. In the 1950s, it started being called couples counseling, but it was driven more by politics and religious views in America more than modern science. Our next chart we will go over is cross-tabulations. You have your DV and your IV for this one. Once again, how scientific is marriage counseling, and then our independent variable is confidence in the scientific community. I chose that because if you are going to view something as scientific, you would need to have some sort of confidence in the community. Alright, so moving on, we go into our hypothesis once again for our step 1. We're going to run our test. as we don't, so we're skipping step 2 on this one because we don't have a standard deviation. Or sorry, not standard deviation, a significance. So you have your how scientific is marriage counseling over here, and across the top is your confidence in the scientific community. You can kind of cross tab it and to get your information. So when you cross tab them, very scientific, and a great deal of confidence was only 9.8%. And then people who did not feel that scientific, that marriage counseling is scientific, and those who had hardly any was 35.5, and you can kind of manipulate and look at it to kind of gain a better understanding. All right, moving on, a little bit more information, and then I break down the results. Moving on into graphs and charts. These are a little bit more plain and simple. They don't give you as much information as far as specifics, but they do serve a great purpose. If you don't need a whole lot of information, they will provide that for you. So as this paragraph right up here gives you a little bit of information on histographs and bar charts and what they're good for. It talks a little bit about nominal curves and how they're a symmetrical bell curve to show the normal distribution of variables. Alright, so my hypotheses once again are stated, and then you can look at these bars to kind of get an idea of how people once again view marriage counseling and scientific confidence. And it's basically the same information, but in a little bit different visual form. You have your counts right here, and then you have your variable breakdowns along the sides. And then we go into an explanation a little bit more there. Alright, now this moves us on to the second of the 3 topics. Now, so this study was conducted in 2013, and this gives you a little bit of an idea of how people view marriage counseling prior to getting married. I felt that was very relevant because if you go into a marriage and you and your spouse do not have a lot of faith in marriage counseling or in understanding what it is, then you are less likely to seek it out when times get tough. And they found that 83% of the 250 couples interviewed had poor knowledge. So which then leads to a better understanding of why people do not have a good confidence in marriage counseling as a scientific practice. Then they conducted some more information on the people, and then it reanalyzed how they viewed it. And of the 250 couples, only 8% stated they had a good knowledge of marriage counseling. That is very low. And going into the next one, this one gives you a little bit more information on a broader scale. So there was 134 people that were considered chronically or seriously distressed as a couple, and they were monitored over 5 years after their counseling sessions to see whether or not counseling had a great effect. This was a very fascinating article. So it used the traditional behavioral counseling therapy and integrative behavioral counseling therapy. They put people through both styles, and then over the next 5 years they monitored them. The couples that were monitored on a regular interval for 5 years to check their progress. What was interesting is that 50% of the IBCT couples were still married after 5 years, and 45.9% of the TBCTs were still married. So that's a huge, significant increase. And of those that were still married after 5 years, 19 out of the 68 couples were still were considering getting divorced. What is even more impressive is that 134 total couples of the of the 134 couples, 1/3 were recovering and were not struggling anymore. That is very impressive. It shows that marriage counseling does work. So that kind of gives you an idea of some information on it, and thanks for listening.